Welcome to the Lazy CEO Podcast, where Jim Schleckser, author of Great CEOs Are Lazy and founder of the CEO Project, features compelling experts and topics for CEOs of mid to large-size companies. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome, everybody, to another Lazy CEO podcast. My name is Jim Schleckser. I am your host and the founder of the CEO Project. Well, today we're going to talk about, it's kind of a basic topic, but anybody who's played athletics knows that the basics make up the game, right? So the better we get at the basics, the better we are at the game. For soccer, it's, the better dribbler you are, the better passer you are, the better the game gets played. And so in this case, we're going to be talking about delegation. And, you'd think like, oh gosh, we all figured that out in, Management 101. But I'm going to tell you that it may be one of the top topics when we're dealing with CEOs is how do I delegate? When do I delegate? Or even more, they don't even realize that they're not delegating. And this is how you end up working 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And this is completely against the idea of being, kind of a lazy CEO. And so the lazy CEO, the one that is effective and efficient with the use of their time, is about delegating anything that they are not uniquely capable of doing. In other words, if anybody else in the organization, or frankly, maybe even outside the organization, can do something, we find a way to delegate it and let them do it. And so we talk about this when in trying to create time, right? And trying to get ourselves down to a focused amount of time that we spend on our businesses, in that 40, 50 hour sweet spot. And I talk to people about building the not do list. Everybody has a to-do list. I've got one right here. But what's on your not do list? And on your not do list, it is, first of all, everything you're supposed to do in rank order of economic impact on your business. So the thing that has the highest economic impact, really the point of constraint or the kink in the hose, back to the CEO, the Great CEOs Are Lazy book, that's at the top. And we work our way down to the less critical projects. And down at the bottom, there might be things like updates or regular meetings you do that aren't super critical, but you feel like you've got to keep doing them or whatever. Or maybe, extremely frequent meetings with certain members of your team that maybe aren't really needed. You draw a list halfway up that list, halfway up that list. And everything below the line, we do 3 Ds. We either defer it into the future, meaning we just let it sit there and hopefully time solves it. And what I've found is, you'd be surprised at how many things that seem urgent in the moment, and you let a little time work for you, and it turns out they're not that critical, or they solve themselves, or somebody else solves it, or in other words, you had to spend 0 time on it to get that issue resolved. So defer into the future is a completely valid strategy for some items. And I think, our ability to discriminate as leaders, which ones are critical and must be taken care of now and which ones are not, is an important skill set. The second is don't do. Literally just say, hey, I'm not doing that item. I'm taking it off my list. I'm crossing it off. Now, what's cool about this is that we all get this little endorphin buzz when we cross something off our list. It's part of what we like about having lists, is the ability to cross them off and say, hey, that one's done. I know I personally love that. To the level that there are times, I will admit, but only to you guys, that I will sometimes have completed something. I'll add it to my list because I forgot to put it on my list, and then I'll cross it off, and I get exactly the same endorphin hit I did as though I had always had it on the list and I crossed it off. So just crossing things off the list is a completely valid, it's just not important enough to spend time on it right now. Even though it made the list, it's time to get off the list. And so being aggressive about anything below that halfway mark is super important. And then the last one is delegate. And this is what we're going to spend most of our time on today. Delegation of less critical topics, ones that you are not the only person that can do this item, is incredibly important to manage your time and conserve your energy as a entrepreneur and executive, and focus on the things that really matter, the point of constraint, for example. So let's talk about delegation a little bit. It part of what makes it hard is our intrinsic desire to do well, right? So anybody who's achieved a high level has got very high standards for themselves and for other people, and we want things to go well. Because we have a, a fair amount of self-confidence in our abilities, we many times make the list of the best person to do that job. And you're probably not wrong, frankly. I mean, I talk about the fact that CEOs in particular are unique individuals. You're special. You are either super smart or a super hard worker or incredibly charismatic or really organized or a great engineer or a good marketer or whatever your thing is. You're probably a 10 out of 10 on your thing. And so you really are truly gifted. You are a unique individual to have made it to that role. And I know we all have a level of humility, but I'm just saying you're unique. If you were not and you didn't have that drive, you'd be doing a different job most likely. And so the problem is when we think about delegation, we compare the person that we might delegate a job to ourselves. This is the fundamental flaw. In other words, I go, geez, I'd love to delegate it to this woman, but she's not as good as I am at it. And you know what? You're probably right. She's not. But you're not a fair person to compare to because, as I said, you're probably a fairly exceptional individual. You're productive, you're smart, you get things done, you've got that capability. And so what we recommend is the 70% rule. So the 70% rule is if somebody is 70% as good as you, or would be 70% as good as you, because they probably haven't done this particular thing yet, you delegate it to them. You let them have a crack at it. And this is really about giving you permission not to compare the person you're delegating to yourself, which is that fundamental flaw, right? Because if you do that, if you compare them to yourself without a discount, without the 70% rule, you'll never delegate anything, or almost never delegate anything. And you'll be working 80 hours a week and wondering what's going on. And so you got to be aggressive about it. The 70% rule is part of that. Now, what's neat about this is if I find somebody who's 70% as good as me and I delegate them with appropriate coaching, I can't just throw them into the hot water and say, hey, have fun. Let's see how it goes. Although some people you can do that too, but most people you probably need to coach up a little bit at least. Shockingly, many times, first of all, they may do it differently than you would do it. And that is something we have to wrap our heads around, that if I delegate something, the way they do that task may not be exactly the way I would do that task. And that's okay if we are managing to results, right? So remember, we have the opportunity to manage to results or manage to activities. With high-level professionals, you want to manage to results. In other words, even if you play 12 rounds of golf a week, but you get the job done, I really don't care. So how you get the job done is not as relevant as the outcome that you deliver. And so realize almost certainly they're going to do the project differently than you would do it. And a lot of times we see people like all over somebody trying to get them to do it the way they would do it. And it's just not appropriate. But as they do the job, they're going to learn. They're going to get better. And, maybe they were 70% the first time, and then the next time they're 80% or 90% as good as you are. And you might be shocked to find out that there are people that over time, particularly if you pick the right person, they could be better than you are at the job, right? Shocker, right? So you were holding on to this thinking there's nobody as good. And once you poured into somebody and gave them a little time and attention and opportunities to give a few cycles, they learn it well enough that they're better than you are at it. Particularly, I think if you're a little older, sometimes younger people have incredibly creative ways that you just were never exposed to. Hey, I used ChatGPT to build this out, and then I ran it through a neural network, and I came up with this answer. And you're like, I don't even know how to spell neural network, like, or AI. So, you've got to be open to creativity about how they may solve that problem differently than you do, and maybe better than you do. So that's really important in terms of delegation. But I think on top of that, one of our jobs as leaders is building organizational capacity to execute. And when I say that, what I mean is over time, the organization has to get better at doing the job, because if you're going to grow, the organization has to grow with it. And in fact, I'll even go further. Growth of the organization creates, meaning in the people's capability, creates growth in the organization. We worked with a fellow who ran a business in Indiana, and his phrase was, companies don't grow, people do. And so the whole idea is the more people grow, the better the company grows. So when I delegate a task that is below the line for me, not important enough for me to spend time on, and I give it to somebody who works for me, and they learn how to do it and they get better at it, guess what I just did? I built organizational capacity to execute. I now have somebody who is fully competent in this job that he or she was not competent at 3 months ago, and now they're rocking and rolling on this whole new thing, and they may take it places that I never would have even thought of. And so the act of delegating is the act of building organizational capacity. And we all want to do that, right? Because we realize if we don't grow our people, we don't grow our business. And so this is all about delegate to grow the business. So 70% rule to delegation. Anything below the line on the don't do list goes either delegate, defer, or don't do. So when we think about delegation, though, let's dig deeper on that particular topic. Now we've got our person in our crosshairs. We know who we want to use, and she's the perfect person, and hopefully she's going to learn it really well. But people think about delegation as abrogation, meaning I just hand it over and I never see it again. And that is really, really scary. We go, it's important. I want it to go well. I don't want to completely delegate it, because then what? What if she screws it up? Now we've got a problem on our hands. And so I want to just help you with, there are levels of delegation. And when we think of that, that's actually the very, very tippy top level of delegation. And I'm going to say, you don't go there quickly. You want to go to the top level delegation under certain circumstances, but not all the time. So imagine, there's probably 5 significant levels of delegation. There are probably levels, gray shades in between these. But at the first level, I might say, hey, take a look at this issue, investigate it, come back to me with your recommendations on what you think you might want to do. I'll make the decision about what we're going to do. So I haven't lost decision-making rights. All I've done is I've outsourced the research and the understanding to come up with a plan. Somebody else does that, and I tell them which one I'd like them to do, and then they go do it potentially. So they're consulting with me before the decision is made. In fact, RACI, this is the C, consult. And authority, I still retain authority and responsibility, by the way, R and A. The next level up might be investigate this, come up with a recommendation. Unless I say no to you, meaning I stop you from doing it, go ahead and just do it. Like if I don't respond within 24 hours or 48 hours, just go ahead and do it. So that's a higher level of delegation. They have responsibility for not only research, but the plan. By the way, the one below that was just research it and come back to me with what you've got, right? Then there's research it, develop a plan, come to me, I'll decide. Now we're in research, develop a plan. Unless I say no, then you go forward. So it's like opt in, opt out effectively. The fourth level might be go research it, come up with a plan, execute it, and then just let me know what you did, right? So, hey, afterwards, so now in RACI, responsible, authority, consult, and informed, they are now after the fact. They're just informing me of what they did. They didn't consult with me what they wanted to do. This is a higher level of delegation. For some tasks, maybe that's appropriate. And then the top level, level 5, is, hey, this is your project. Do with it as you see fit. You don't need to tell me what you did. If you want to, great, but you don't have to. You don't even have to inform me if you don't want to. And so that's a huge level of delegation. And normally our brains, when we hear the word delegation, we go there, hand it off, never see it again. And I'm going to say there are at least 4 levels of delegation below that, where you still get to put your fingers on it, either before the decision is made or before the plan gets executed, or at a minimum, you find out what happened afterwards so you can maybe deal with it if there was a problem. And so that level of delegation is important. And there's a couple of factors that help you decide where on the levels of delegation you should go. So let's start with the relative seniority of the person. So let's say I've got a very junior individual. They just graduated college. They kind of barely know where the men's or the women's room is or the cafeteria. And I'm going to delegate to somebody who's quite young and inexperienced. Um, where would I want to be on that delegation curve? Frankly, probably down near the bottom, right? Go research it and come back to me, or go research it, come up with a plan and come back to me. Down at level 1 or level 2 delegation, because frankly, they're really junior. They're really green. They don't know. They're going to make lots and lots of mistakes, but the only way we're going to develop them is with that interactive process. And so, now contrast that with somebody who's a proven commodity, senior person, been there, done it. They've been through the bit of the war with you. That person, you might delegate more aggressively to them, particularly if they know something kind of about the area. You might go right up to level 3, which would be, come up with a plan. Unless I say no, go ahead and do it, or come up with a plan and execute it and just let me know what you did, or even potentially all the way up to 5, depending on what it is. And so the seniority of the individual is a factor when you consider, and their experience in the area is a factor when you consider delegation and where you want to go. Now, obviously, over time, people grow, as I indicated. As I work with that individual, the next time I give them a project similar to this, I might bump up one more level of delegation and go to level 3 or level 4, or level 5, depending on what the project is. So that's seniority is an important, and sort of prior experience is an important element in thinking about delegation. The next thing that's important when you contemplate delegation is reversibility. So Jeff Bezos talks about this. He says one-way doors or two-way doors. It's the same thing of reversibility. So the idea is that some decisions, when I make them, I am all in. It would be extremely hard to reverse that decision. Now, I'm going to say there is almost no decision that's impossible to reverse. Let's just say really, really hard to reverse would be what we're talking about. I mean, with enough money and enough time, you can reverse anything pretty much, even a bad tattoo. So this is more about that. Easy to reverse things like, I made a mistake, change it, let's go back. Those are two-way doors. A one-way door might be, let's rebrand the entire company. Change the color scheme, change the name, change the website, change the blah, blah, blah. We're going to change everything. I'm not saying you can't go back. I'm just saying it's really expensive, embarrassing, and time consuming. And so the reversibility of the decision is an important factor as well. The decision to rebrand the company and what that would look like, I would delegate that extremely slowly, like maybe never fully delegate it, right? I always want my finger in a rebranding of the company because it's so irreversible. If we screw it up, my gosh, it's going to be a pain in the butt to fix it. Compared to what sandwiches are we going to serve for lunch at the company picnic, right? I don't care. Pick it. Like who, and if we don't have enough ham, cheese, bologna, whatever, it doesn't really matter that much. So, and we could just order some pizza if we need to. So there's like so easy to fix. Let's not even waste any time on it. We've got a new protocol for reserving conference rooms. I'm making that up, but just do it, right? I mean, it's completely reversible. If it doesn't work, we're going to change it. If we need to go back to the old way, we can. Like that's a highly reversible decision. And so this question of reversibility is something you need to contemplate when you think about how aggressively, where on that scale of delegation I should be. So we've got now seniority of the individual and prior experience. We've got reversibility of the decision coming into where do we end up on this continuum of delegation. So the other thing to think about is risk. And the example I use here is a ship in the ocean. You're the captain of a ship, and imagine a torpedo hits you above the waterline. You go, meh, okay, that wasn't so great. We'll fix it. We'll move on. But if the torpedo hit below the waterline, this is a huge issue, like sink the ship kind of issue. And so when you're thinking about risk on a delegated item, think about above the waterline, below the waterline issue. And literally could use that language. Like, is this an above the waterline issue or a below the waterline issue? Above the waterline issues, low risk. we delegate those quickly. I mean, the sandwiches at the picnic, I use that example. That's a low risk decision. Like a couple of people might be unhappy, but fundamentally, it doesn't matter that much. A high risk decision might be the choice to deploy a new product line, invest in a new product line. That's a high risk decision. That's a lot of money. We can make a big mistake. We could put egg on our face. That's a high risk decision. And so I'm not sure that I would delegate that one so quickly. I might move up the delegation curve fairly slowly on a high risk, below the waterline type of decision. Maybe repricing a major customer. Let's jack their price up 10% because our costs are problematic with this particular customer. And you run the risk of losing the customer. So that's a high risk decision. And we may want to delegate that one a little more slowly. So those are really the three factors when we're thinking about where on that delegation continuum should we be. Should we, seasoning, wisdom, prior experience of the individual, reversibility of the decision, or one-way doors and two-way doors, to use Jeff Bezos's phrase. And the third is risk, above the waterline, below the waterline. And you can build your own little 3D matrix in your head of high seniority person, reversible decision, low risk. Delegate like crazy. Bang, let's go right up to 5. Let's get that one over with. Low seniority person, irreversible decision, or largely irreversible. Risky decision. It may not quite be below the waterline, but it's darn close. We delegate that very, very slowly. You might go to level 1 or 2, but you definitely want to have eyes on it before any final calls are made on a decision like that. Now, over time, even those, if you get somebody who's super trusted, like you've been through it with this individual, you may even more aggressively delegate high risk and irreversible decisions to that person, particularly if it's in their domain of expertise. You may choose to do that. And so, that's how to think about it. And, obviously you're monitoring, I made that decision, I delegated to that level. I'm checking in with them, particularly if it's a lower level of delegation. And did it work, right? In other words, this is not a one-off and we set and forget. This is a continual learning process about the level of delegation I can go to with some individuals. So, for example, I've had people that I thought I could delegate more aggressively with them. And what I found is they couldn't handle it, right? In other words, well, for example, I handed them something that was low risk and above the waterline, right? And I'm like, here, just take care of it. They needed, for their own reasons, to come back and check with me. Like, okay, here's what I think I'm going to do. Is that okay? I'm like, I told you, it's your job. You decide. And yet there's this need to check back on certain issues. So that's a training thing of, when I say don't come back to me, I mean don't come back to me. Like, you figure it out. I have complete faith in you. There is no wrong answer here. You're going to be just fine. There are other times where I've delegated to people something a little more critical, and they didn't check back like they should have checked back with me on, they got to a sort of an inflection point issue, and they just made the call. And so even within a project, there may be 80% of it you don't need to check with me, but these 1 or 2 little things, I would really like you to just check with me before we launch it. I'll give you an example. When I would launch products, I always wanted to just look at the final design. I almost never changed anything. I just wanted, like, does it look right? Does it feel right? Have we asked all the questions? And then pricing. I was always very, very tight on pricing. I want the right margin. I want the right profitability from design principles, because it's so hard to change it later once you've gone into the market with a price. Now I've got to move the price because we had it at the wrong level. And so I always was very, very tight on price, for example. So though everything else, they can source the components, supply chain, how they're going to manufacture. I didn't care. It wasn't that critical. We could fix it if it was a problem. But those couple of things I personally kept an eye on. And so even within a larger project, there may be a couple of key items that you say, look, you're delegated to level 3 or 4, but on these 3 items, you're at level 2. I want you to come and talk to me before you make a decision. And so that is some subtlety that exists within delegation on larger projects. And I think, you'll find that this is super uncomfortable in the beginning, particularly if you're not accustomed to being an aggressive delegator. You'll get better at it over time. And actually, what I found is I spent more time trying to be an aggressive delegator. I was when I found something I thought I could delegate, I was like, oh, goody, I can get this off my desk and let somebody else take care of it. It made me happy to delegate. And so you should take, pride in being a really good delegator, because it's not a common skill, and you can really, really leverage your capability massively if you have a capability of delegating. Because why? You're only spending time on things that you can do. The organization is fully engaged. They've got, for them, maybe reach projects, right? Remember I talked about developing people, something that may not be important enough for you to spend time on. Somebody who works for you, they go, hey, the CEO just gave me this cool project and he trusts me to handle it, and da 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 da. And I don't really know this, but I'm going to go figure it out, and I'm going to learn, and so that is flattering and developmental. And so the more you do that, you get the sort of rep of being somebody who aggressively develops their people. And yet what you're really being is kind of lazy, right? You're like, let me delegate everything I possibly can. And like, I love working for him because he gives me these cool projects. I'm like, I will give you cool projects all day long. So I don't have to do them. So anyway, that's delegation. It's a bit of a complicated topic, and it's always got a little emotion involved in it, and some terrifying moments as we hand things over to other people. But I think if you follow some of those guidelines, you'll feel like you're operating within a framework at least. And you can always check, do I need to be a little higher, a little lower, to tune your methodology for yourself and for the people around you. So I wish you good luck with that. This is part of the pathway to becoming a lazy CEO. So being great at this will make you better at the game. And I look forward to seeing you next time on the Lazy CEO podcast. Thanks for joining us. This podcast is brought to you by the CEO Project. At the CEO Project, we work with CEOs to help them grow their business. And our members represent billions of dollars of revenue and profit. And frankly, amongst all of us, we've probably made every mistake in the book, including some you haven't made yet. So if you want to learn from the experience of a bunch of really seasoned CEOs, we're a great place to hang out. In this podcast, what you're going to hear are some of those ideas, concepts, and things that are just going to help you on your journey. If you want to find out more, reach out to us at theceoproject.com, or you can contact me personally at jim@theceoproject.com. Happy listening.
Thanks for listening to the Lazy CEO podcast. We'll see you next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes, and check out our website, www.theceoproject.com.